Three things occurred to me as I studied the first two episodes of Season 8 of Game of Thrones. The first is about protectors, the second is about parents, and the third is about weddings. Let's start with protectors. When Podrick is singing Jenny's song, we see five couples: Sam and Gilly, Arya and Gendry, Theon and Sansa, Missandei and Grey Worm, and Jon and Dany. There's a major common thread that runs through the character arcs of Grey Worm, Theon, Jon, Sam, and Arya. Consider Grey Worm and Theon. Grey Worm was seized by slave masters who dehumanized him and made him into a weapon. Theon was seized by Ramsay, who dehumanized him in the same way. In both cases, they suffer a mutilation that theoretically deprives them of romantic love. Now think about Jon Snow and Samwell Tarly. They go to the Night's Watch, where it's forbidden to take a wife or father children. When they arrived, Alliser Thorne bullied them and demeaned them, along with all the new recruits. So the Night's Watch had become a place that dehumanized people, deprived them of romantic love, and made them into soldiers. This is very similar to what happened to Grey Worm and Theon in certain ways. Finally, there's Arya Stark. She joins the Faceless Men, who almost literally dehumanize people by turning them into killers who give up their identities and become no one. So, when Podrick sings the love song, all five couples we see include a person who has traveled this arc: Grey Worm, Theon, Jon, Sam, and Arya. They all became dehumanized and weaponized by someone else. And now look what's happened to them. They've all found romantic love. Sam is with Gilly, Jon was with Ygritte and is now with Dany, Grey Worm is with Missandei, Arya is with Gendry, and yes, Theon and Sansa are included in the montage because they're having feelings for each other. This theme is very important. Think of what Grey Worm and Missandei say to each other. Grey Worm will protect Missandei's people who can't protect themselves. Theon volunteers to protect Bran during the battle. And Jon says that Samwell should protect Gilly and the baby, even though Samwell refuses. The point is that when people are fully human, when they have empathy and experience love, they can use their fighting skills to protect the weak, and that's the way to do good in the world. But when people are dehumanized, their fighting skills often do harm rather than good. And now we come to the big idea. This is the story of the Night King. In Season 6, we see him being created by the Children of the Forest, and we're told that the children created him because, quote, we needed to defend ourselves, unquote. So they literally dehumanized a person and made him into a weapon they could use. And it backfired because that weapon turned on them. A protector needs to have humanity in order to do good rather than harm. When the Night's Watch was first created 8,000 years ago, they knew this. In the books, we learn that the original Night's Watch vows didn't say anything about taking no wife or fathering no children. The Night's Watch was never intended to dehumanize anyone or deprive them of love. They knew what happened to the Night King, and they didn't want to repeat that mistake. But over time, they forgot. And as we learn in Episode 2 of Season 8 from Samwell's monologue, forgetting is deadly. The good news is that the current plot is reversing the story of the Night King. Sam, Jon, Grey Worm, Theon, and Arya have rediscovered love and humanity, and now they can be the right kind of protectors. Surely some of them won't survive, but their similar story arcs show that people have finally started to figure out how to correct the ancient mistakes that threaten to destroy the world. Okay, now let's move to our second topic: uncertain parentage. Obviously, Jon Snow's secret parentage is a gigantic plotline, but we've also seen additional references to the idea of uncertain parentage, and I think the show is hinting that this could become an even bigger story than it is now. Let's start with Tormund. He tells this wacky tale about a female giant who mistakes him for her baby. It doesn't matter whether the story is true. The important thing is that it provides an image of a baby whose parents aren't the people they are believed to be. That's the same thing with Jon Snow. And in both Episode 1 and Episode 2 of Season 7, the word clever is used in relation to Tyrion Lannister. Sansa says, "I used to think you were the cleverest man alive," and Tyrion later says, I made a mistake common to clever people. In the books, House Lannister was founded by an ancient man named Lan the Clever. According to legend, Lan secretly impregnated women, creating children who were not supposed to be his. And Lan himself pretended to be the son of the first king of Westeros. This theme of deceptive parentage is repeated a lot in the books. There's the tale of Bael the Bard, there's the baby switch between Gilly and Mance Rayder, etc. So what does this mean for the show? One thing it almost certainly means is that this played a role in the life of the man who became the Night King. But I doubt that will get explored in the remaining episodes. What might get explored, though, is this theme as it applies to major characters. In Season 1, the plot was driven by the mystery of who fathered Joffrey, Tommen, and Myrcella, Cersei's 3 blonde-haired children. And now in Season 8, Cersei is pregnant and 2 different men believe they're going to be the father, blonde-haired Jaime and black-haired Euron. That seems very likely to become a major issue. Maybe this issue will also arise if another character becomes pregnant. That hasn't happened yet, though, so it's probably premature to discuss it. Finally, I'll turn to the third topic, weddings. In Episode 2 of Season 8, the Hound says something very jarring when Beric Dondarrion joins his conversation with Arya. He says, "It's like a bloody wedding." As we know, weddings are bloody in Westeros, and I think we get other wedding references in the first 2 episodes, because there are 4 different times when a character says the words, "I do." Tyrion says it to Sansa about Cersei. No one fears her more than I do. Later, when Jon asks if Sansa has any faith in him, she says, "You know I do." When Sansa asks Brienne if she vouches for Jaime, Brienne says, "I do." And in a later scene, Tyrion responds to a comment of Brienne's by saying, "I think we might live. I do." So the words "I do" are being associated with Tyrion, Sansa, and Brienne. What's going on here? The simplest possibility is that none of this means anything. We should definitely keep that in mind. But the Hound's comment about Beric, a bloody wedding, is so striking and weird and unnecessary that it might well mean something, especially given the bloody weddings we've seen. And if you want to write dialogue that evokes weddings, the words "I do" are perfect. So it's possible that a wedding or 2 is being foreshadowed. The obvious possibility would be Jon and Dany, although they're fighting at the moment, so we await episode 3. Other possibilities include the characters who say "I do," Tyrion, Sansa, and Brienne. Could Brienne survive the battle and marry Jaime? Or Tormund? Doesn't seem too likely, but let's keep an open mind just in case. What about Sansa? Could she marry Theon? That doesn't seem too likely either, but again we'll keep an open mind. That leaves Tyrion. There's no obvious person for him to marry at the moment. However, I've speculated that Sansa will preside over Westeros in the end, with Tyrion at her side as an advisor. Could they once again be husband and wife? I wouldn't bet on it, but if it happens, there's been some foreshadowing. Could Cersei marry someone? Jaime and Euron? Are possibilities. Again, I'm not betting on it, but let's keep an eye on these thoughts. If there is a wedding, we need to consider what we've seen at weddings in the story. And what we've seen is death. We see people die at Khal Drogo's wedding to Daenerys, and of course we see people die at the Red Wedding and at the Purple Wedding, which is the one where King Joffrey gets murdered. The Red and Purple weddings have another similarity, which is that it's specifically the king who gets killed. Robb Stark was king in the north, and Joffrey sat on the Iron Throne. Also, they both involved betrayals. So if we see a wedding, betrayal and kingslaying are things to look out for. But then again, this is a story about reversing the mistakes of the past, so maybe we'll see a wedding where disaster is averted, or doesn't strike at all. One way or another, we'll all find out pretty soon.